Hi, I'm Harriet, a strategist based in the UK. When Giles got in contact with me and suggested that I do a talk, my mind immediately went to the amazingly intimidating lineup of people that have already spoken, and I thought, what can I possibly add? So I took my mind back to school and revived the age-old cliched advice, talk about what you know. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I've been thinking about recently in the way that I see stuff. As with everything, not all of it might make sense to you, but it makes sense to me right now. But hopefully you'll find some of it useful, so feel free to take of it what you will and discard the rest. When this whole thing hit and we knew we were going to be working from home, we knew we needed to take everything that we might need because we weren't going back for a while. So I packed up my laptop and my monitor and I went into my desk drawer and packed up random cables, just in case. I also grabbed some essential reading material. But it isn't just the standard strategy books which line my desk, but this and this. And then later that evening I started reading this, Art as Therapy by Alan de Botton and John Armstrong. For me, art's always provided some sort of therapy, consolation and hope. It's helped me find meaning in the mess, so it's pretty helpful right now. In this book, de Botton and Armstrong suggest that art can help us deal with the day-to-day problems which face us, to help us find clarity and resolution. As the synopsis says, and I quote, "It's the author's contention that certain artworks provide powerful solutions to our problems, but in order for this potential to be released, the audience's attention has to be directed towards it in a new way. Therefore, this book involves reframing and recontextualising a series of artworks from across ages and genres so that it can be approached as a tool for the resolution of difficult issues in an individual life." It's really pretty poignant. I thoroughly recommend reading it, or at least heading over to YouTube and watching Alan de Botton's talk by the same name. This book isn't what I'm going to talk to you about today, mainly because I could never do it justice. However, the underlying theme is useful to remember. Art can be used as a tool to help us deal with problems, to find clarity in the chaos. Now, I'm a great believer that the things you learn outside the office can be as useful as the things you learn inside the office. I grew up surrounded by art, I studied it, I spent my weekends decompressing by going to galleries, amongst other things. But I never really thought about how it affected the way I approach my day-to-day job until recently. This is largely because when I was an art student, any talk of commercialisation would be thrown out the room. So for years I felt a sense of shame when I was reunited with my peers and talked about what I do. Don't get me wrong, I love my work, but in some ways it felt less pure. I'd sold out, I was never going to be an artist because I'm a strategist. But then over time I came to realise that there's actually more connections between art and strategy than I first thought. And as it turns out, I've been using the thinking techniques I picked up at art school all along. Don't worry, I'm not about to make some kind of bold claim that strategists are comparable to great artists, far from it. However, I do think there's quite a lot to be gleaned about strategic thinking from looking at art and the way that artists work. So what are the links between strategy and art exactly, and importantly, how is that helpful anyway? Here are 5 things that I've learned. Number 1, pay attention to the negative space. Throughout the course of history, art has been used as the key to unlock culture. It can tell us as much about the zeitgeist as any written record and rival any film in its ability to stir emotions. In part, this is because artists pay attention to the negative space. They look between the gaps to find new ways of looking at the world, reaching into the depths of societal consciousness to create a new kind of commentary. In other words, they say the stuff which is otherwise left unsaid. Their sole job is to deconstruct accepted ideas and merge them back together in unexpected ways. When successful, these new ideas have the potential to completely change the way you see something. When it comes down to it, that's what we're striving for in our work every day, to challenge the status quo, to cut through, to stand out, to be remembered. But often there's so much focus on getting to the answer, we project what we think to be true without stopping to question what we're looking at. I, for one, have been guilty of that. So when looking for that insight or that solution to a creative problem, try to take a step back. What is it you're not seeing? What's the fundamentally human thing which is otherwise left unsaid? Uncovering the unseen is how artists connect with their audience. It's an important part of their toolbox, and ultimately, when used well, ours. Let me give you an example. Edward Hopper is widely recognised as one of the most influential realist artists of the 20th century, inspiring generations of artists, filmmakers and creators that followed. He's also one of relatively few artists that have made it to household name status. He's managed to successfully navigate that tricky area, creating work which is classed as art by the cultural elite without alienating the mass majority of people. This is because he knew how to capture the essence of a situation, the negative space, the stuff which isn't said yet when presented to us is instantly and universally recognisable as a feeling, an emotion. When you look at it, you go, yeah, I get that. In one of his most famous paintings, Nighthawks, we are literally looking through the window on urban culture. The diner at the point where 2 streets meet is a real representation of the loneliness and solitude a lot of people feel. It's because of this that his paintings have a timeless relevance, and there's no better proof of relevance than social validation. Given that he deals with loneliness and solitude and fear, it's not surprising that his work has had a resurgence of popularity during isolation. As this tweet shows by its thousands of retweets and likes, we are all Edward Hopper paintings now. Number 2, question the question. So as I said earlier, looking beyond the obvious and taking a step back to uncover the things which are otherwise left unsaid is important. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? The problem is that every day we make thousands of assumptions based on what we think we know. It's part of our biological instinct and unconscious process. In Ways of Seeing, John Burgess says this relation between what we see and what we know is never settled. As he points out, the surrealist painter René Magritte commented on this gap between language and meaning in his work. This painting, known as the treachery of images, or pipe painting, has become so known precisely because it draws attention to these preconceptions. Cecina Pat and Peep is not a pipe, it's an image of a pipe. There's a subtle but distinctive difference when it comes to how people see it. Magritte, like a lot of contemporary artists, would often put ordinary objects in unusual contexts, taking complex and contradictory ideas and simplifying them in a way that made people stop and think. Now, I could get into a long debate about the philosophical connotations of all of this, but that's for another time. On the surface, what this painting does is draw our attention to something that, once pointed out, seems so obvious. Why didn't we see it that way before? When it comes to strategy, stopping to question preconceptions is key. What's the question behind the question in the client's brief? Is the insight obvious? If you flip the assumption, what happens? Is the idea more useful, more meaningful? Will it be remembered? Number 3, find the tension point. Like Magritte, artists from Brecht to Basquiat have played with how our subconscious interprets signs and symbols, often using language and image to create a form of narrative tension. Finding and communicating points of tension, whether it be for the brand, the consumer, or the category, is a key part of writing compelling insights and effective strategy. It's a linchpin in building strategic narratives, the moment where you move from problem to solution or turn an observation into an insight. I've always been curious about the way that American artist Ed Ruscha plays with tension points in his word paintings. He purposefully combines contrasting imagery and juxtaposing phrases to create friction. Putting the banal to work like a great comedian, he creates simple yet powerful statements and provocative comments, using linguistic devices such as alliteration, puns and onomatopoeia to build a vivid yet relatable picture in your mind. Titles such as Pretty Eyes, Electric Bills and Smells Like the Back of Old Hot Radio, Do You Think She Has It? All layered with signs and cultural symbols. In his later work, he uses evocative imagery such as mountaintops as stage settings to set the tone for the image. Pay Nothing Until April, for example, is a reference to the banality of a lot of mass marketing. The purpose of art, like marketing, is to convey a message, so there's something to be learnt from looking at the way that Ruscha uses language to construct a narrative, how he begins to uncover compelling cultural insights by juxtaposing contrasting ideas and brings them to life by using simple words which are easy to understand and relate to. It's a good example of lateral thinking. By putting things which are seemingly at odds together, he sets the scene for new ideas to play out. Number 4, context shifts meaning. Artists purposely craft their work to provoke a reaction, layering it with messages and metaphors, creating context to paint a picture in people's mind. But 9 times out of 10, the context in which it's seen is out of the artist's control. The words it's paired with, whether it's seen in one gallery or another, alone or with others in a book, a line, or in real life. Every day, art, like brand communication, undergoes contextual shifts which affect how the original idea is perceived. Now, this is kind of interesting and something I've thought about quite a lot because, in many ways, looking at art and how it's displayed, how context shifts meaning, for me is more than just a lesson how to frame an idea. I set the context, but how to reframe it. In marketing, reframing is taking an idea about a product or a category and shifting the emphasis to change the way people see it. For example, positioning a weakness as a strength or a problem as an opportunity, and so on. Reframing relies on context. Artists and curators, like narrators and marketers, know that context is critical. John Berger makes a point of this in Ways of Seeing, the TV series and subsequent book of the same name, and I'll just show you a clip from YouTube to show you how.
As well as by the movements of the camera, paintings are modified and changed by the sounds you hear when looking at them. Here is a landscape, a cornfield with birds flying out of it. Look at it for a moment in silence. Now, supposing I say, whilst you look at it, this is the last picture Van Gogh painted before he killed himself.
Whilst in the TV programme he illustrates the point of music, in the book he takes this one step further, saying it's hard to define exactly how the words have changed the image, but undoubtedly they have. The image now illustrates a sentence. Suddenly the context reframes the way that you see it. It's no longer a painting about life, it's a painting about death. The words bring a whole new meaning to it. The exploration of the way that context shifts meaning is central to the artist Ham Steinbach's work. He takes everyday objects and groups them together and displays them on signature wedge-shaped shelves and in modular displays. He talks of these as framing devices to focus in on and reposition familiar objects in the minds of the people that look at them. Steinbeck's aim is to make us re-see. In everyday life, Steinbeck says, we neutralise objects, we make unconscious associations and assumptions about them based on what we know. And as anyone who's repositioned a brand knows, the longer assumptions are held, the harder they are to break. That's why the reframe is such a powerful device. Finally, master the art of the edit. The power of good work lies in the simple expression of an idea that's hard to put into words. As Alan de Botton and John Armstrong point out in Art as Therapy, we want to remember what really matters, and the people that we call good artists are in part the ones who appear to have made the right choice about what to commemorate and what to leave out. So often the impact of art isn't felt because it's overlaid with complexity and lengthy intellectualised explanations and so on. We don't get it and often leave art galleries feeling confused and dismissive. The same can be said about strategy, albeit the deck is our canvas and the boardroom is our gallery. Art, like strategy, is a form of seduction. It's divisive for sure, but whether you care for art or not, certain images draw you in precisely because they focus in on a single compelling idea. As de Botton says, art edits down complexity and lets us focus, albeit briefly, on the most meaningful aspects. There's a lesson for all of us in that. So there you have it. To recap, pay attention to the negative space, question the question, find the tension point, remember context shifts meaning, and master the art of the edit. I'll probably never be a great artist, but studying art has taught me at least a little about being a better strategist. Not least, it's taught me how to find meaning in the mess. And right now, I'll take all the help I can get with that. Thanks for listening.